and welcome to Health Service Management 407 Healthcare Marketing and Strategy. We are going to pick up today discussing the concept of the dilemma that we're faced with in healthcare between determining need versus wants within healthcare. In healthcare, this is a major concern as providers have a responsibility to take care of your needs. And when we refer to needs, this is in response to a condition where there's a deficiency, such as maybe a vitamin deficiency or something where you need relief of something. It could be pain medicines to control post-surgical pain. It could be blood pressure medicine to help control high blood pressure, so forth and so on. However, many of our consumers that are seeking a professional response are to that of wants. So what is a want? A want is something that's desired but not necessarily needed, more like a wish concept. You may want an appetite suppressant to assist you with losing weight. But we have to be mindful that meeting medical needs has to be and is the primary purpose of the healthcare system. So the distinction between a want and the need many times leaves the healthcare professional with the dilemma. And the dilemma is going to look different as it often masks the question, who is the customer? And when we are looking to identify who the customer is it going to be the expectant mother that is looking for different features that are available and services that are available wherever she is going to deliver her baby? You would want to garner the input from that expectant mother to identify what their desires are, and then to be able to distinguish between a need versus a want. Medical needs are going to be those things that would involve, modern labor rooms, and that the consumer's needs are being closely addressed. And most often, a customer who's going to be involved in any type of a clinical situation definitely has expectations of high quality clinical outcomes, but so many times many do not shop for any kind of additional services that are going to accompany those high quality outcomes. So that is an example, one example. Another example that I could give to you when we are identifying our consumer in order to determine wants versus needs, you may have an individual present and want that appetite suppressant, and you as the professional are left with that dilemma. Because this person may want it because they just want to lose 10 pounds and they've tried everything and can't lose it. But it may not be impacting their health. So you as a healthcare professional are reviewing everything and you view that as a want, because there is nothing present that indicates that there is a medical necessity for that appetite suppressant. And yet the other individual may be 50 pounds overweight and need to lose that 50 pounds in an effort to, maybe help bring down their blood pressure, better manage blood sugars, or they may be needing a surgery or something that extra weight is prohibiting them from obtaining. With that said, I want to draw your attention to your PowerPoint here, which you can also find in your text. It's figure 1.1. It actually shows an array, but of course it's not all inclusive, of potential markets for healthcare organizations, where they will offer a whole host of different services to accommodate the different organizations trying to ensure that all consumers' needs are met through an integrated system that makes navigating through that system seamless. So please take the time to review that in detail. One of the things is you're looking at the various different organizations. You can see how they would most definitely make up the market of healthcare organizations, because in your schools, sports medicine may be targeted. In your long-term care facilities, they're at the very bottom at the 6 o'clock hour. If you were looking at it at 1 o'clock, your long-term care facilities would be mostly, you would be marketing for geriatric care. So that goes, you can look at that and see how that works. So please take time to review that and to become familiar with it. The era production is used to help us understand how marketing has evolved. Now, your text provides you with some wonderful examples using the Pillsbury Company as an example. So I want you to take the time to really focus in on that and become familiar with it, because we look at the evolution of marketing not only from the traditional side of business, such as the Pillsbury Company, we also look at it from the healthcare side, even though the evolution in healthcare has occurred in a very relevantly short amount of time in comparison to others in the more traditional business industry. During the production era, you can look over, I will call your attention to table 1.1, where you can see during the production era, Pillsbury purely was focusing on product quality. That was their focus. Within the hospital, the marketing focus was clinical quality focus, which brings us to the sales era that occurred by 1920, when the automobile was introduced and roadways were increased, which allowed for consumers to become more mobile, and that caused companies to have to begin the strategic planning and changing phase, where they begin to hire traveling salespeople. And this brought about an increased competition. The sales era occurred in the mid-1970s in regard to healthcare as a result of some of the reimbursement changes, because initially The hospital was focused on not only having as many patients as possible, but also attracting as many physicians as possible to admit patients to their hospital. That was like kind of the underlying goal there. But like I said, that was before, and this preceded the era of utilization reviews. And at that point, hospitals had to begin looking at how they were going to focus on the sales orientation end of it, as opposed to a lot of volume. If I will draw your attention again back to table 1-1, you can look here under the sales era. Pillsbury, which is your traditional business, evolved into their focus being generating volume. And equally, the same thing occurred in the healthcare industry because they were looking at filling beds. Also, hospitals at that time began to recognize that the patients may begin and might be playing a role in what facility they would go to for their services. So a strategy that they used was selling to the market through promotion programs and advertising strategies that promoted the various programs that they had within their organization. They may do billboards, they were doing television and radio commercials and so forth and so on. These advertising goals was a way to encourage patients to use hospital facilities when the physician presented a choice, or they could self-refer themselves. So as we see, again, as we refer back to table 1-1, through that sales era, they were still focusing on being able to fill those beds. However, when we got into the marketing era, this evolution to marketing actually took place after World War II, as the demands for products and services increased, and healthcare marketing also evolved as well, and continues to evolve today, and that is evidenced through the integrated system delivering seamless healthcare. There are also, when you look back again on table 1-1, under marketing, in this evolution of marketing, the main focus in your traditional business was satisfying needs and wants. And within the hospital or healthcare profession, they were focusing on identifying healthcare needs and meeting those needs. And through that integrated system formation, they are able to deliver seamless healthcare products and services to the buyer that may not even be delivered within that clinical care setting. But they also are accepting the risk of the cost of that care through what is known as the managed care products. So therefore, it's a focus that begins with the consumer, and the organization is responding to that demand. And as you would imagine when you hear the word vision of your organization is about what an organization will be in the future. Generally, it is a 5-year plan. Remember, your mission is what your organization is all about, what it does on a daily basis. It's your character, your identity, and your reason for existence. It's the rationale for action. You have to, the mission has to be set first for your organization, and then the vision is established. And then you will determine critical success factors that are going, these are factors that is going to help your company achieve its vision. Your vision is basically your second step of your strategic planning process, formulation, and sometimes this is very difficult and can be very time consuming because this is indeed your long range planning committee debate, which generally is your 5-year plan of where you want to be in 5 years. And your textbook gives you an excellent example of a successful planning process and a not so successful planning process because things were not kept in proper perspectives, and politics and power struggle came into play with starting a new business. And that scenario is, and you can read about that. I'm not going to go into it in in the lecture, but the scenario that they use is a very common result of a non-marketing driven planning process. And the whole problem with that non-marketing driven process is that it just requires a group of people. Or one powerful, persuasive community member, which is what happened in this particular scenario with the physicians and the sports medicine center. You've got to be able to have some good insight to the services that are needed within the organization and outside the organizations. Therefore, the limitations of the internal to the external perspective of the non-market driven approach also is that you have to be able to overcome the political powers of some of the people within your organization. And they are addressed by taking what is known as a more market-driven planning approach by that the organization's mission and goals are in place. And, it is substantially different. And we'll get into that a little bit deeper over in further into the study, so we're not going to get too deep into that at this point. But whenever you are determining the needs that's most needed, you have to examine the competition that's around you, and you've got to be able to identify new offerings that's going to give you a differential advantage. These are incremental benefits of a product or a service that your organization can offer. And there are strategies, market research, and strategies that have to be taken in order to determine whether that particular service or product will give you that differential advantage. And your text is going to talk about the pre-testing that you need to do in regard to programs and consumer relationships to see if you have enough interest from your target market before you implement the change on a full-blown scale. And then you've got to have your research to determine, as we spoke earlier, about the product, the price, and the price that the consumer is willing to pay. And how is that service going to be different from what others are offering, other organizations are offering? Is it our location? Have we changed our hours? That type of thing. When you look at figures 1, 2, and 1, 3 in your textbook, it shows how market research can actually lead you to the difference, and sometimes they are dramatic differences that can result when you are working with your long-range planning. And it is imperative that you do long-range planning. If not, you're going to be left behind, because as the controlling factors evolve, especially in healthcare in regard to your regulatory bodies that determine the laws and governances and reimbursement of your services, you've got to stay on top of that, and you've got to demonstrate efficiency and financial prudence, because you cannot overlook those things, or your organization is going to fold. It's not going to be able to be profitable and stay in business and meet the needs of its community. As a result of the competitive environment in our healthcare organizations today, many of the organizations have moved into a market-driven planning approach. They find themselves facing competition as well as challenges as they are dealing with the changes in reimbursement mechanism strategies, and they're having to modify how they respond to that within the marketplace. Also, there's all types of subspecialties that are out there. The contractual agreements with the hospitals and the physicians, where the physicians are now on a performance metrics used by the healthcare organizations. And if they were going to purchase the practice, they're going to be using a matrix to determine whether that organization provides enough healthcare services and is profitable enough to purchase that business. All healthcare organizations need to find that differential advantage where they can encourage buyers to use their services. And healthcare organizations are very physically astute to this. And this market-driven planning process is just one tool to help them minimize any kind of mistakes out there. We have discussed the non-marketing driven approach as an internal to external methodology that is being used. In contrast, your market-driven approach follows an external to internal methodology. Your non-market driven approach to planning uses an internal to external methodology, and your market-driven approach follows an external to internal methodology. We need to be mindful as healthcare providers that we are acutely aware that the market-driven planning process does not always guarantee success, nor does the other for that matter. It just helps to minimize the probability of failure. It's important to recognize the difference, some of the key differences between these two market-driven approaches, whether it be market-driven or non-market-driven, as the major structural approaches that they have in regard to planning and implementing a strategy, is that the inside sequence in the market-driven approach is actually a process that begins internally in the organization when they are reviewing that mission and the goals of the organization. This is critical, that it is recognized in the rim of the whole healthcare organization. Then the market on the outside needs to be addressed, where you are addressing your potential customers to determine and sit and look at what you're doing, and then determine whether the mission and the goals are in alignment with one another. Does there need to be some sort of change? Has there been a drastic change in the competitive market? Has our target market area, has that changed as well? So those are things. Market research at 2 points. This involves service development and your pre-test. This is the core element of the marketing approach. And it is imperative that you understand the consumer through market research. And market research actually takes place at 2 stages. It can be at the service development stage, where that's the initial point of understanding of what and determining between wants and needs of the consumer, and if there's any gaps out there in your marketplace. And then and the second part, or second step in your market research, is your pre-test. Now, many times organizations, once they have identified what the needs are, and they have formulated the service and got everything ready, many times they are tempted to not conduct the second phase of market research, the pre-test phase. And really, without conducting this, it really minimizes the value of your initial market research, and many times it leads to service failure. So your pre-testing component of your market research is critical to the success of developing a service or a product that you may be wanting to add to your organization. The customer-driven differential approach, this is very essential to recognize, and it's from the perspective of a market-driven approach. However, many times it's believed that they have a good product, or that they have a better service than anybody else in the market. But we have to be mindful that the key here, the essential component is to whether the consumer believes that there's a greater value and price or effort worth buying. So therefore, one of the primary purposes of the initial phase of market research is to uncover and determine critical elements to the customer, which is going to identify how you can market to them to help them to switch suppliers, to come over and to do business with you. But this is a key challenge whenever you are doing market research, and we'll talk about that even deeper into, I think it's maybe the next chapter, in chapter 2. We need to be mindful that this market-driven planning that we just have been discussing, this approach, is more of in the context of a macro setting. And we're going to discuss more about that in our next lecture. Everybody have a wonderful day, and I look forward to our next lecture.